Anime conventions. They are everywhere and everyone wants to go. But is it really for you? When I was younger, there was not a single anime convention hosted in my city. But in recent years, anime conventions have been springing up everywhere, along with the ever-growing anime fanbase. I think it's worth having a conversation about if you should go, how to plan, and what to do when you're there. Let's start with our own convention experience. As I mentioned, my home city had no conventions, so it was only when I moved to London a few years ago that I actually got to start going. However,
I've been going all my life. Well, since I was 14, so close enough. And we now go together at least twice a year, if not more. The main conventions we go to are Hype Japan and MCM Comic Con London. It's so fun stepping into a convention hall full of like-minded people and then wandering the stalls and booths. I love spending all my money and getting to talk to cool artists. We also went to a few different conventions during university, but those were more niche industry events for VFX and video games.
An important place to start if you think anime conventions look cool is if you should even go in the first place. You might be thinking, of course I want to go. Everyone's in cosplay, taking awesome pictures and meeting all these cool artists and actors. Well, this video might just ruin some of your hopes. Sorry. Anime conventions, like similar events, are busy. Like, really busy. Expect to be waiting in line with hundreds, if not thousands of other people. And when you get in, it won't be much less crowded. Honestly, we've started getting there a little after opening time, so we can just walk right in after the lines have cleared. Sometimes the queues will be outside, and in the colder months, in a skimpy cosplay, that's not easy. You will also be standing for potentially an hour if you get in there early enough. It's a lot, and it can be more physically exhausting than you might expect. So consider how capable you are of physical exertion. By the end of a convention, my feet hurt so bad. It's not necessarily a reason not to go completely, but you may need to consider strategies and accommodations for yourself. I use broad terms because this can be applicable if you're abled or disabled, if you're going with younger people or even children. Queuing might just be harder for you.
Some strategies I suggest if this may be a problem is to wear comfy clothing and shoes, even if you're cosplaying. When I was younger, I would wear heels to cons and genuinely cripple myself for days after. But now I'm in my 20s and my body can't deal with that, so I wear comfy shoes. If you worry they won't suit your outfit or cosplay, trust me, no one looks down at your feet, and the comfort is worth it. If sitting is easier for you, then I recommend a fold-out stool or collapsible seat. I've seen people bring these to conventions before, and as far as I'm aware, most conventions will allow these items. But check your desired convention's website, and don't be afraid to email the convention for clarification if needed.
The next thing to consider is a big one. If you're from a town or a country that doesn't get conventions, and you're thinking of flying internationally or traveling cross-country, think really hard about your decision. I know it sucks being cut off from these events, but I've seen so many people who've flown to London feel incredibly let down by conventions. It's unfortunate that distance makes the heart grow fonder, and even the best day ever might feel underwhelming if you set your standards too high and put a lot on yourself and the trip. If possible, I would recommend starting with a more local convention, not necessarily even anime, but for anything else you're interested in, to gauge your tolerance and enjoyment of these events. If you're planning on traveling far, maybe consider making the convention only one part of your itinerary. See some sights, hang out with some friends or family if possible.
So you've decided against all the odds that you want to attend an anime convention. There are a few things we would like to recommend you do before you arrive. Bring water. Even if it's winter, even if there's snow outside. You're going to be in a big building full of thousands of people, and that gets hot fast. You may also be walking around a lot and sweating more than you expect. Stay hydrated. Not all conventions have water facilities. Cough cough, Hyper Japan last summer, and the ones that are there may be hard to reach repeatedly if you need to drink a lot. Also, buying any drinks from the convention itself will financially ruin you, but that's something for later. After water is food. In recent years, we've started bringing our own food to conventions, because it's cheaper and easier, and so far no one has stopped us. I think it's similar to cinemas where it feels more illegal than it is, but you can absolutely bring food into conventions. Of course, double check the convention website if you're really worried, and again, those support emails are there to support you. Don't be afraid of inquiring. If you don't want to bring a whole lunch because of the weight or worries about it spoiling, just bring a few snacks, like cereal bars or whatever you personally like. Something small and easy just in case you need a break to refuel. Consider your needs from similar events if you've been. Long walks, concerts, day trips. How hungry and thirsty do you tend to get? And then build in some contingency. If you normally drink 2 liters of water in that time frame, bring 3. If you eat 3 snacks a day, bring 4 or 5. Try to balance this with your other needs. And if 3 kilos of water seems too much, bring a normal sized bottle and check if you can refill it somewhere. Or be prepared to pay some money for other drinks. Along with weight is another suggestion. Bring some kind of backpack. Not to sound like a school teacher, but going single strap here is gonna hurt in an hour or two. Just having the space to store things like food and water will make everything so much easier. This also gives you space to store your many purchases. Try not to go too large, as you'll be in big crowds. And when you can close tight is good if you're worried about security or tripping and sending all your possessions flying.
Another thing to consider is if you'll be going as a group or alone. There's nothing wrong with attending an anime convention alone, and if you're more comfortable that way, go for it. If you prefer a friend or many friends, that's okay too. One thing I would recommend is that a large group of friends is really hard to keep together and naturally will split apart and get separated. 2 or 3 people are easy to keep an eye on, but more than that can be its own stress. Also, even with 2 people, you may lose them in a crowd. If you're particularly worried, arrange designated meeting spots and times for if you get really lost, because in a lot of conventions, those big concrete and metal buildings will absolutely destroy your phone signal. I wouldn't recommend full-on baby harnessing your friends and loved ones, but keep an eye on them, and if you lose them, that's okay, you can always meet up again later. They've probably just seen something interesting and wandered a little further down. I would say, on average, I lose a friend to the con crowd every 30 minutes. A good rule of thumb is to stick to one aisle and don't go round any corners. Get to the end of an aisle and wait there so you'll be easy to see and you'll probably find each other quickly. Now to go more adult about it all. Budgeting. Being in a big room full of shiny objects and pretty art is as close to temptation as many of us will get, so it's important to set a limit on yourself. Calculate how much you can afford or want to spend and try to stick to it. This will be hard, and you will probably fail. You may be tempted to forego food for the next month to buy a picture of a pretty anime boy, and that's your choice, but I'd advise against it. Along with budgeting is money. Most artists and sellers have a card machine, but some don't, and sometimes the card machine will be in use or stop working due to the aforementioned awful phone signal. And if you have cash, you might be a knight in shining armor for a poor artist who's had to say, give it a moment, at least 10,000 times that day.
So now you've decided to go and you've done all your prep work. What can you actually do at a convention? Of course you may have already encountered this in your research, but I'm assuming you will at least watch this whole video before jumping onto Google. It varies from convention to convention, but your typical anime/Comic-Con will have roughly the same sort of activities on offer. So let's dive into them, and their pros and cons, to help you decide if you want to experience them.
First up, stalls. These can be broken down into roughly 3 subgenres: food, sellers, and artists. Food is, well, food, and sometimes drink. You tend to get a range from food trucks to more artisan cuisine. Portions vary from snacks to whole meals, and prices vary from expensive to more expensive. If you like food and want to try a range of things, you may genuinely be looking at £30 per person. Conventions are pricey. I do want to defend the vendors here a little. Trading at a convention is not cheap. You can easily be looking at hundreds into the thousands just for the pitching rights, let alone staffing, ingredient and machine costs. These people need to make a profit to continue their business, so it's not worth being annoyed at them. Some positives of food stalls: having a range of foods to try in one place. In our experience, a lot of stalls will have some kind of combo option with a bit of everything. You also tend to get a variety of cuisines from around the world. There's a lot of range here. For some people, these foods are less accessible in their own areas. So if you come from a town with very little culinary variation, this may be where you want to allocate a big portion of your budget. The main negative is obviously the price. For some things, prices have been rising to over £10, which hurts. Everything has been getting more expensive, so it is what it is. You will also have to queue for a long time if you go at the peak times, but this can be avoided by going earlier in the day. Generally, the lines start building around 11:30 for lunch, but that's not a hard rule, so use your best judgment. Portion sizes also tend not to be great. We don't want to turn you off any of these things, just want you to be fully informed, as a lot of content around conventions can be very positive or very negative.
Next up are general sellers. This can be anything from comics to retro gaming to clothing brands. The main thing is these tend to be resellers or larger companies that import products for sale. Some of it is officially licensed, and some of it is not. These types of stalls tend to have a large range of products on offer, which is a benefit if you want to see what's available on the market. Because these stalls are importing goods, you will tend to see a lot of the same item turn up, like plushies, partial cosplays, and figures. But there are positives to these sellers. A lot of them will have items that are relatively exclusive, and while they'll charge a lot, there can be savings if you consider import and shipping costs. The overlap in products also means sellers may be competitive with prices, but that's not guaranteed. It can be tricky to calibrate your internal compass for deals, and walking around a whole convention to compare prices may not be feasible. Conventions function on a plane of reality where things shift and move, and you may somehow never end up back where you started. Consider your budget and personal desires. Do you want this exact item at this price? Are you willing to hold out and risk maybe getting a better deal or no deal at all? You may also find products for sale which aren't normally easily accessible, like art books, magazines, or out-of-print items. Another positive is you can normally physically access these items, which gives a better understanding of them than online shopping. Seeing how a plushie feels or how an item fits can be a real benefit, even if you decide to buy it online after the fact. It also allows a more tangible form of shopping than just looking at images. Maybe a particular figure looks so much cuter than the promo pic showed, or a keyring has a real nice weight to it compared to how cheap it looked online. The obvious negative is bootleggers. While a lot of these sellers are importing legitimate items, some may be importing knockoffs, and recognizing these if you've had little exposure to the products can be tricky. Other people have explained this in more detail, so it's worth maybe researching a particular type of item if there's something you have your heart set on buying. Common bootlegged items are anime figures, posters, and plushies. There are some telltale signs like low fidelity in printing, poor attention to detail, and inaccurate elements, like the wrong colors and proportions for a particular character. Even when being prepared, you may end up buying an item that isn't legitimate, and that's okay. It's not your fault, but there's often little you can do after the purchase. If you're worried about a stall that's selling bootleg items, you can report this directly to convention staff members, and they may ban the seller from future conventions by that particular company. As much as conventions should be keeping an eye on this, bootleggers aren't idiots, and they may have seemingly legitimate online presences, and just reselling important items isn't illegal. Other negatives with sellers can be that items may be cheaper online if you can get them domestically. There are now so many more legitimate avenues to get merchandise, and this may be cheaper, as those import and shipping costs have less impact on the price. Try to build an awareness of what's accessible to you in your area so you can work out if things are a good deal. For us in recent years, a surprising stall that was worth it is a Japanese tableware company called Doki Tableware, that's often at conventions. They import pottery from Japan, which means there's an element of curation for the customers, as well as more variety than an individual may find naturally. They are also based in England, so import costs are not a direct issue. As heavy ceramic items tend to have a high shipping cost, and seeing the pieces in person really helps gauge size and pattern. Their presence at conventions really helps over their online shop, especially if you can't get to their physical location. You can also sometimes get items on sale, and these are products I'd never really considered buying until I saw them in person.
Our final type of stall is artists. This includes those inside and outside the Artists Alley. Artists Alley is an area of conventions that was originally more for comic artists to sell their comics, but with the boom of smaller artists, it tends to be much more varied. If you have a favorite artist online, you may be able to meet them in person and buy work from them directly. This is also where we, personally, allocate most of our budget. As artists ourselves, it's fun talking to other artists and supporting them directly with cold hard cash. Artists can also refer to creators who run a slightly larger team or didn't sue Artists Alley. Also, for some conventions, Artists Alley limits what can be sold. For instance, if you want to sell clothing or basically any non-sticker or poster items, MCM Comic Con won't allow you to have an Artists Alley stall, and you have to apply as a regular seller. This is obviously to preserve the integrity of Artists Alley, but with small businesses having more and more access to small-scale manufacturing runs, many have chosen to be in the more general areas. This is just something to consider alongside the whole bootlegger idea we brought up before. Some other types of artist stalls you may see are clothing, jewelry, prop or food stalls run by small groups or individuals. Some interesting ones we've seen are fandom-themed tea blends, an apothecary, and handmade fashion harnesses. There are lots of benefits to these stalls, such as giving you access to the artists you're a fan of, although there is etiquette here, which we will touch on in a bit. You can also buy products without shipping. Small artists often cannot ship their items affordably, as they aren't in a position to negotiate lower rates like larger companies can. Buying 1 or 2 items is so much more affordable with no shipping. You also get to see new artists, and collecting business cards is a fun activity to dabble in. This is our current business card collection. If you're an artist or someone who might need an artist, this can be a great way to network and find potential clients or collaborators. You can also discover products you are unlikely to find from general sellers, such as unique art or products like stickers and pins. In general, most stickers and pins on general seller stalls are not legitimate items, although the whole debate of if fan works are copyright infringement is a minefield. Personally, I'd rather support small artists drawing Leon Kennedy with his tits out than a large company churning out art that is unlicensed and probably stolen. Another benefit is that a lot of artists will be doing fun things with their stalls. Gacha machines have become common recently, as have lucky dips and blind bags. There can be a lot of novelty in the Artists Alley that you won't find at other stalls. There are negatives to Artists Alley, and again, this isn't to scare any of you off, it's just to give you all the information you need to make the best choices for you. Even though most artists radically undervalue their work, it's still potentially more expensive than similar products you might find. Small artists do not have the luxury of economies of scale, and you'd be surprised how much less manufacturers charge for 500 pins versus 100 pins. You're also paying a luxury for that particular artist's time and effort for that design, and while that doesn't translate one-to-one, they still need and deserve to make money off their work. While cheaper than other pitches, Artist's Alley certainly isn't cheap, and it's not uncommon for artists to run at a loss. Quality is also not guaranteed, as there is variation in product manufacturing, and these are often semi-professional artists who do not have the time and money to create products of a more established company's quality. Although, equally, you might find something that should be in an art gallery instead of being £25 or 3 for £50. It's a mixed bag like anything in life. Small artists may also not have card machines. This has improved a lot over the recent years, to the point where it's surprising if they don't have some kind of card reader. This isn't a negative per se, but it is important to consider if you're mainly going to visit Artist's Alley. You may also find that more popular artists will have large crowds, so it's up to you if you feel like hanging around or maybe trying to check out some lesser known artists for some hidden gems.
Okay, so that was just the shopping, but there's so much more on offer, so on we go. A common activity at conventions is cosplay, dressing up as a character. This is very likely to see as there's not many places where cosplay is socially acceptable, so it's an excuse to dress up. There are a lot of activities around cosplay, but a lot of people will just wear it to conventions casually. If you feel bold, there may be cosplay competitions you can enter. These are especially for handmade cosplays, but if you just want to show off, there are sometimes cosplay showcases that are more casual and don't have prizes. A lot of conventions will also have meetups for people cosplaying similar characters, such as from a specific show or franchise. These are normally community-led, and so vary, but photo shoots and socializing are common features. A big positive of cosplay is feeling included. At a lot of big conventions, the majority of people will be in cosplay. This doesn't mean you have to, but it can create a sense of belonging and a quick way for someone to strike up conversation with you. It's also common for people to ask cosplayers for photos either of them or with them. You can be either side of this dynamic, and asking for photos is encouraged. This is often non-professional and for memory's sake more than anything. If you're uncomfortable having your photo taken, you can say no. It's not required, but an openness to photos is generally expected if you're in cosplay. As fun as dressing up can be, there are downsides. A big one is comfort, as we've mentioned before, but this comfort can extend to more psychological areas. A lot of characters have impractical or skimpy clothing, and if that's unusual for you, cosplay may be something you need to take specific consideration with. Be this picking a character with a design you're comfortable with, or modifying a cosplay. Safety shorts, shorts that are worn under revealing skirts, are common, as well as sports bras or t-shirts. But equally for some, being able to dress vastly different to their usual self can be empowering. Both of these are valid expressions. Your openness to photos being taken is also something to consider. If that's likely to make you uncomfortable, consider your boundaries and if cosplay is for you. The same for if you have issues with unexpected communication, but that may be a larger consideration when attending conventions as a whole. A lot of people go to conventions to socialize and speak to like-minded people. At the end of the day, cosplay should be fun and we should make it fun for others. Be nice, compliment people, and be respectful. Adjacent to cosplay is alternative fashion. As with cosplay, conventions are often a place where people feel safe wearing alternative fashion, and there may be catwalks for brands, or fashion parades depending on the convention. Some common alternative fashions are Lolita, punk, Japanese streetwear, I can't actually remember, fuck that. At the end of the day, this is a safe space for self-expression, and you don't have to be the best. Just have fun with it.
Next up we have panels, workshops, guest appearances, and performances. These are as varied as the people who present them. Panels will typically involve an individual or group of speakers discussing a pre-prepared topic on their niche, be that writing, art, cosplay, etc., and may also involve Q&As or audience participation. These will vary between conventions and the days of the convention, and very rarely repeat. A lot of conventions take place over a weekend, so Friday to Sunday. So looking into the panels may be something that sways your decision. Unfortunately, due to logistics, these aren't normally announced until a month or so before the convention, if you're lucky. But if this is something you're excited for, it's worth building your itinerary around them, as they have strict times compared to other activities. Panels are a great way to get insider knowledge in an area you're interested in. They can also provide a nice break from the hectic main halls, as often there are designated stages or rooms for the panels. A big negative is that these can often be hard to access. Popular panels may be too busy for you to get a seat, so if you're uncomfortable with standing for 30 minutes, getting there early or bringing your own seat is a possible accommodation. There may also be queues to allow you into certain panels, so be prepared and don't turn up dead on the start time. Panels are also so varied and can be hit or miss. It can also be very awkward to leave a panel as you may be worried about insulting the panelists, but if you're uncomfortable and not having fun, it's unlikely anyone will notice you slipping out. This may even be a positive, as you get to have more fun and someone else can steal your seat. Guest appearances can often overlap with panels, as a lot of guests may also do panels on something. Other activities here are meet and greets, which can include autographs and photo opportunities. The main positive here is you're very unlikely to organically run into these people on the street, so it's something to take advantage of if there's someone you particularly wanted to meet. As with panels, these are often announced a month in advance and are liable to change, so consider carefully if you're only going a certain day to meet a specific person. Guest appearances are a fun way to give back to the people who make what you love. Gifts are not uncommon, but there's a lot of etiquette around them to consider. You can also financially support guests, but this kind of leads into the negatives. A lot of guest appearances can be pretty predatory. It's not uncommon for a photo op or autograph to top £100 depending on the guest. This tends to be based on their level of fame, but it's very disappointing to see this level of financial gatekeeping over a glorified selfie. Meet and greets also tend to have a time limit, so there also isn't time for you to talk to the guests for that long. There's also the slight risk that the old adage, never meet your heroes, may rear its head. Even seeing some actors I enjoy charging ungodly amounts of money for these events has soured me on them. Not that they necessarily have full control over the pricing, but it can definitely be saddening to feel so othered from these people. I've even been to conventions where they put the guests behind curtains so you can't even see them from afar for free. Guest appearances will also be at set times, and you may be given a slot you have to turn up for to get your meet and greet, so planning is paramount. Again, this is just for information purposes. If all you want from a convention is to meet a particular person, then that's what you should consider while planning your convention activities.
Workshops are something that vary from convention to convention and may include food and alcohol tastings, cooking, or artisan workshops. These can be a fun way to access a craft if your area does not offer similar things. Most people are unlikely to have a local calligrapher, so getting to experience these activities may be unique to the conventions you decide to go to. Workshops may also incur an additional cost, which is something to consider. From what I've experienced, this tends to be anywhere from £10 to £30, but it's another one for research. Often a workshop will be run a few times over a day or weekend, so it can fit around other plans, and you won't normally need to provide any equipment, which is great if you want to trial a particular craft or activity. Performances are another activity that varies, but there are some general themes. Often they include singing or dancing, with K-pop performances becoming increasingly popular, but they may also be demonstrations of martial arts like judo or lightsaber battles. As with the rest of the activities in this section, they will be at a set time and may not have seating. For singing and dancing performances, they may be incredibly loud, which is an issue some people have had with certain conventions in recent times. This can spill out into the area beyond the performance stage, so if you're uncomfortable around loud sounds, you may need to reconsider attending or find an accommodation that works for you. This could be something like headphones or earbuds, although you should take consideration while trying to navigate the convention as a whole. At the end of the day, something we want to impart is that you don't have to go to conventions. After every big convention, there's this inevitable wave of people complaining about having a bad time. And while a lot of this is fair criticism of mismanagement, a lot is just people who feel betrayed by how conventions are depicted or advertised. If you have issues with loud noises, crowded spaces, and being on your feet all day, this sadly may not be a good place for you to be, even with accommodations. And that's okay. This video's goal is to prepare you, or help you prepare as much as possible. And if the end result of that is you don't want to go, that's perfectly fine. Equally, you may want to try smaller conventions first, or just jump right in to confirm. Obviously, that can be a lot financially and mentally, but if you want to leave, then it's better to put your health and comfort first. Fuck the sunk cost fallacy, you matter more. If you're a little worried but still want to try, we've provided a lot of tips throughout, but here are some more. Most big conventions will have a Friday event, and this tends to be much quieter. There may be less there, but if you can't access smaller conventions, this can be a good way to dip your toes in and test the waters. Similarly, conventions may offer early admissions, which give you normally 1 to 2 hours. This will have less people and help you acclimate to the convention, be that establishing meeting points, locating suitable food, water and seating, or getting in and out before the mad rush. We're also only 2 people, with only so many experiences. So reach out to friends who have been to conventions before and find out what they think. This is a great way to get first-hand advice on a specific convention. You could also look to social media, but a lot of content around conventions is relatively in the heat of the moment, shall we say, and may not accurately depict all experiences. I've seen videos complaining about queues I managed to completely miss at conventions before. None of this can give you a whole picture, but by cross-referencing and considering your own boundaries, you can make a good guess for yourself. As ever, our comment section is there if you need some more personalized advice. Fun fact, YouTube lets us filter for questions, so if you want us to definitely see your comment, make sure to include a question mark, because I'm pretty sure that's all that filter actually does. Useful though. So now we've bombarded you with every piece of information on conventions under the sun, let's round off with some simple etiquette for everything we've mentioned so far.
Etiquette. As with all things in life, there are a lot of invisible lines we have to navigate, which may be more obvious to some than others. This isn't going to be comprehensive, but it's some things to keep in mind, and maybe some things you hadn't considered, and some general advice we couldn't fit in earlier. Food and drink! You can sit on the floor and eat. You can also bring your own food. Bags! Keep bags small so you don't bump into people. I've made this mistake before and I feel really bad about it. Try not to have so many things hanging off your bags that could get caught on people or stalls. Clothing. Abide by your local authorities' public decency rules. I didn't think I had to say this, but while you're in cosplay, understand that people may call you by your character's name. If you're in a large cosplay, a lot of conventions require a chaperone. Follow prop rules because you may lose your prop if it's in violation. Budgeting and money. Do not attend cons if you cannot afford it. This will just leave you having a bad time. Keep cash on you securely. Do not take out large amounts of cash. Do not spend your disability allowance on Love Live merch. Apparently, this is an anecdote. Travel. Be mindful of others on public transport. Be aware that not everyone will know why you're dressed up. Plan in time for delays before and after the convention, and leave early to avoid rush hour. Stalls. Most stalls do not allow bargaining. It can come off as really rude. Do not touch the items if the seller has a notice asking you not to. Feel free to ask questions about the products. Be mindful of queues, and if other people want to access the stalls, try not to stay too long in an area so everyone gets a chance. Interacting with artists. Do not shit talk the artists in front of their stalls. They can hear you and you're being a dick. Do your bitching out of earshot like a civilized person. Again, do not barter, it's rude. Don't insult the artists to their face in general. Be polite. If something is out of your price range, be tactful about it. Don't ask invasive questions and don't trauma dump on them. If this is someone you follow online, you may feel a closeness to this artist, but they do not feel the same way about you. Google parasocial relationships if you want more information on that. Interacting with cosplayers. Asking for photos is all good. Do not ask for lewd or inappropriate things unless they have somehow made this an option. If you're unsure, are on the safe side and do nothing. Asking for contact details or social media to tag them is okay, but may seem too much, so you may be turned down by a lot of cosplayers. And compliment them. They're putting themselves out there, so let them know they're doing a good job. Understand you will bump into others and be bumped into. They're not doing it because they hate you, it's just crowded. Try to have an appropriate level of familiarity with them. This is a hard one to gauge, but a lot of people aren't comfortable with a stranger telling them their whole life story, or being overly fond. But still, most people will be comfortable with some level of socializing. In general, consider that you are neither better nor lesser than anyone else there. You don't deserve special access or to get to the front of the queue, and similarly, others don't deserve to demand those things of you. Panels, etc. If there is a Q&A, save questions till then. Don't heckle or make inappropriate comments. Avoid doing an in-joke or bit that's funny with you and your friends, because it may not translate well to strangers. The London Comic-Con Trash Taste panel last year was painful to watch because people didn't follow this rule. Try to check in advance if guests accept gifts or have specific rules about food. Some people don't accept food, period, and it's worth double checking. And lastly, don't be a dick. Do your research and leave if you're uncomfortable.
If this video has helped you, leave a like, maybe subscribe to see what else we do next. Probably won't be anything related to this. We also have a Patreon if you want to and are able to support us there, and a second channel that's mostly streams and a bit more freeform content. If you have any questions, suggestions, or confessions, drop them in the comment section and we'll do our best to reply. Thank you for sticking to the end, and we hope your convention experiences will be better off from listening to this video.
Bye bye!